It's Sunday, September the 15th, and this is Trillium Talk, a look inside the week that was in Ontario politics. I'm Scott Sexsmith and excited to have back with us Deputy Editor at the Trillium, Snay Duggal. Snay, welcome back to the show. Great as always to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Scott.
All right, let's get things rolling. You had a story last week, Snay, that focused on school boards. In fact, 40% of boards in the province reporting budget deficits this year. The numbers are staggering, yet Education Minister Jill Dunlop says boards are in good financial health. You can't have it both ways, Snay, so where's the disconnect?
Yeah, I mean, so these numbers came out at a government committee meeting on education spending estimates. It's the first time that we've heard publicly about the breakdown since boards had to submit their budgets at the end of June. The new minister was there along with several ministry officials, and the opposition were grilling them. A Green Party MPP had asked about their response to several boards reporting deficits, and this is where the numbers came out. As you noted, the minister said that school boards are in good financial health, and the way that she put it was that nearly 60% of boards are reporting surpluses or balanced budgets. So the breakdown, 43% projecting an in-year deficit this school year, with a total deficit among the boards of $200 million. 36% with in-year surplus, and 21% reporting balanced budgets. Another official, said that boards are sitting on $1.9 billion of reserves to help them with their expenditures. And she also said that, deficits aren't necessarily a bad thing because it's money that's put aside for a future purpose. And that boards have to incur these deficits in order to be able to spend this reserve funding. And that's a bit of that's where the problem is, according to some boards. The former head of the Public School Boards Association had told me back in June that, it might look like boards are sitting on money or have money in the bank, but there are very few boards with money that has not already been allocated to something that they know is coming in the future and that they'll need the money for. So they've saved for it. And she had said that, if you use that money for something else now, well, that becomes a problem in the future. So the disconnect really seems to be, what boards say they're experiencing on the ground, and that they've saved this money for something in the future. And the government's saying, well, the boards have money to spend.
All right, so it's a rainy day fund, but some say the rainy days are here. Okay, so Kathleen Woodcock, who heads up the Ontario Public School Boards Association, says there's a real risk of boards having to make some tough choices if these trends continue. What does she mean by that, Snay, and what would that look like?
Yeah, and I mean, Kathleen didn't mince her words. She said school boards, just like everyone else, are experiencing rising costs, and that the status quo is not sustainable. So she said if things don't change, students are going to feel the impact through cuts to supports and services. So this could mean that boards have to cut staffing positions, for example. So the remaining staff are, potentially stretched thin or covering a wider area. It could mean that boards have to reconsider whether to offer specialty programs. They could even be things like language programs, for example. The Halton District School Board had said a couple months ago that they were projecting a deficit for this school year, even after cutting more than 90 positions. And they had said at the time that this would mean bigger class sizes for special education, for kindergarten, for high school classes. It would it would affect the ability to maintain school buildings and grounds, and also affect the ability to replace aging technology. So things like tablets, for example, instead of replacing them, maybe, I don't know, every few years, boards might have to think about keeping them in play longer. So the effects can be pretty wide ranging and to a bunch of different areas.
The online reaction to this story was intense, to say the least. Sinead, what are people saying?
Yeah, people seem quite upset. There are some that really feel education should be a priority, and seeing these numbers, they feel like it isn't. One online user's response was that boards are running deficits, but the government can spend money on booze. So they were referring to the government's alcohol sales expansion. Some other users referred to an announcement earlier this week where the province announced $26 million for a training center for LiUNA, which is a union that has been fairly PC friendly. So these numbers seem to have kind of struck a nerve with some people across the province.
All right, sticking with education, the NDP and education unions are calling for an emergency safe schools plan to address violence in the classrooms. How much of the growing need for this ties back to what unions and opposition parties say are budget cuts?
Yeah, and the NDP and unions would say that it has a lot to do with that and the fact that they don't think funding is keeping up with inflation. I should note that this isn't a new issue. Unions and educators have been talking about this for a while in terms of violence in classrooms. The NDP education critic did say that the violence that educators or students are experiencing in classrooms is not the student's fault. So what she said was that when funding isn't enough, or when students with additional needs don't get the one-on-one time that they require, or when students who require therapy or supports don't have access to that or enough of it within schools or within their communities, that sometimes it can come out in the form of frustration and violence, and that this carries over into the school setting.
Yet the government is claiming that since 2018, they've increased mental health supports by over 570% and added 900 education workers and vowed to continue to boost funding. Clearly, it's still not enough, though.
Yeah, and that's what those in the sector would argue, that it isn't enough. And they say that they're seeing the results of that through burnt out staff, people leaving the profession or not coming into the profession. And we hear about this in the form of, the staffing crisis in schools where there aren't enough educators. Their argument is essentially that if this is still happening to the extent that it is, something needs to change. And a good deal of that, according to them, comes down to funding.
It usually does. For the most extensive coverage of Ontario politics anywhere, download and subscribe to Trillium Talk wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and log on and become a Trillium Insider today at thetrillium.ca. Deputy Editor Sinead Duggal, great to have you with us, Sinead. Thanks for this and have a great week.
Thanks so much, Scott. You too.